There's so much noise in my mind right now because this is not an easy video to make. Nobody likes to fail, and nobody likes to admit that they failed, and nobody likes to talk about their failures. But I'm still going to go ahead and make this video, A, for the greater good of humanity, so that somebody else doesn't make the same mistake or mistakes that I did, and B, this is slightly less humanitarian and more personal, but B, I also process my grief, my anxiety, my stress, my worries by talking about them. So I'll just put it all out to the world and try and process with the grief, because God knows I'm very sad and very heartbroken. But anyway, hi and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Zar. I make videos about my family and my life here in the UK. We moved a little less than a year ago and we're getting settled in the UK. We're in London, in East London. Now a little bit of background about my own driving journey. I don't technically qualify as a learner driver. I have been driving in my home country, Pakistan, city being Lahore, for the better part of a decade actually. The traffic rules in Pakistan are very, very, very different than the traffic rules here in London or in the UK generally. The road markings are very daunting when you first get here in the UK, because there aren't nearly as many road markings in Lahore or in Pakistan generally. So honestly, I would feel that when I started off, I'd feel like there's a lot of clutter on UK roads, because that's not the way that it is in Pakistan. The rules are different, and the right of way and the way you turn, basically it's all quite different. But I have been driving, I do have road awareness, I do know how to drive a car, a manual car. And even here we bought a manual car for me. I even took my lessons on manual cars. So I wouldn't call myself a learner, but in some ways I do feel that where I am is harder, because you have to unlearn a lot of things. And like my driving instructor very graciously pointed out, you have to unlearn all the bad habits. And if you've been driving for a long time, like I have, then those habits become basically muscle memory. And having to unlearn them and then learning to do the right thing, or learning to do things the way that they are in this part of the world, takes time, it takes effort, it takes patience, and can be very, very, very frustrating. It can be extremely frustrating. I passed my driving test, my theory driving test, and then we had to look for a practical driving test. Now the way to do that in theory is quite easy, because you go on the UK government website and you book a test. But the problem is that when tests come out, a lot of instructors, and there's this whole mafia, I don't know who all they are, but these people, they basically bulk book tests and then they sell them at a premium. So you end up paying about £200 for a test that should have cost you just £62. And I'm not even talking about your driving instructor's fee. I'm not talking about using your driving instructor's car, which is more recommended. I do own a car. My driving instructor did give me the choice to drive my own car or hers. We opted for hers because it's a dual control car, and it gives the invigilator more peace of mind knowing that they can take control if they need to. And for that, obviously, I had to pay my instructor as well for the use of our car, because the driving test is about 40 minutes and then you have about a 1 hour lesson before that. So you have to pay the instructor for the 2 hours that you book their car for, basically. I'm not very proud to admit that there have been instances where I have felt very overwhelmed on the roads, where I felt scared, where I felt it was very daunting. I've made mistakes that I'm not proud to admit, which is why I didn't want to go out all on my own. And I would prefer going with either my driving instructor or with my husband. But I do feel that a big mistake that I made was attempting my test before I had put in enough hours of practice, not enough hours of lessons. I know everything that you have to know. I have all, sorry, that sounds completely cocky, and I don't mean to be cocky at all. Trust me, if anything, then this driving test was extremely humbling for me, so I don't want to sound arrogant. But what I'm trying to say is that all the knowledge I have, there are no knowledge gaps. And I told my husband this as well. I will publicly declare this on YouTube as well. My instructor did a good job telling me everything that I needed to do, giving me all the lessons. I did a good job learning all the theory. So I know all the theory, but the practice part of it is what I was lacking in. And I realized this on my driving test because I was extremely nervous. I was obviously in test conditions. I had this feeling that I was being judged obviously, because that's what the invigilator does. She or he is effectively sitting there to judge how you're driving. And that feeling, all of that became very overwhelming for me. But I should have practiced my driving so well that it should have been muscle memory for me. I should not have made the mistakes that I did, simply because I should have put in so much practice that regardless of how I felt, I should have performed much better. Now let's get on to how exactly I failed. Right at the end of the sat-nav part of the test, my invigilator took me to it was a bendy road, and it was a residential road. I promise I know the difference between the terms invigilator and examiner. I just messed it up in this video. Every time I say invigilator, please just imagine that I said examiner, okay? It was an examiner, not invigilator. So there were cars parked up on either side of the road, and she told me to pull up next to a car and then do the parallel parking maneuver. My driving test was at 8:20 on a Wednesday morning, and this happened, I would say, 20 minutes or so in my driving test. So it was about 8:45, 20 minutes to 9 or so, a busy time. I knew I'd be taking my test at a busy time, but I was actually surprised with how overwhelmed I got in this situation. The road was slightly bendy. I'll make it a bit broad here to show you how it was. There were houses here, I don't know why my first house is round, but okay. Houses here, and obviously houses here, just to show you that this is a residential road. It was slightly, I would say, bendy. A little bit, maybe, not too over bendy. There was a car parked up here, and a couple of cars parked up around here. Sorry, I don't know why I pressed, but a couple of cars parked up here as well. And I brought my car in like that. So like that, that's my trajectory. She asked me to park up next to the car and do my parallel parking maneuver. So I pulled my car back a little bit. That's my car now, right? And as I wanted to do this, as I was about to pull back, a car appeared from here. There was a car right here. Now at this point, what I did was I told her, maybe there was a car here, but anyway, what I said at this point was that I see this car here, but I don't think that there's enough room for them to pass, so I'll quickly do my maneuver. And I started pulling back, and I started, obviously at this point the car swings out right, but this person, knowing their right of way, you're meant to stop. Every time somebody appears when you're doing the parallel parking maneuver, you're meant to stop, and I knew this. I should have stopped. This was a bad mistake that I made because I was nervous and I was thinking I'd hold up the road too long. I should have just stopped, but I didn't. This is the story of how I failed the test, so let's not dwell on and on about what I should have done. I'll tell you what I did do. Anyway, so as I started doing this, this car started moving forward, and at this point the invigilator said, no, stop. So I stopped. This was my first serious, that she later told me, obviously. And you're not allowed to make serious faults in your driving test. Anyway, I did stop, and I did know that I had made a major blunder. The car went by, and so this car is not there anymore, right? After this happened, I started reversing, and I started reversing again, and I had my face outward like that when I noticed, so my car's now over here like that, and I noticed that there were other cars that wanted to come. So I started waiting for them. And then I think another one came from here, and then over here, there were, at this point, a man came out of this house, opened the boot up on this car, and started taking, before this happened, I did pull my car back, but since I was so nervous, I pulled my car back and I wanted to turn in like that, but if I would have done that, I knew I would have hit the curb. So I asked her, can I pull back in the front and then do it again? And she said, now this is something I shouldn't have asked her. I know that you can readjust. It would have been a minor, but I know that you can. She said, do what you normally would. And I laughed and I said, normally? Believe me when I tell you that this is one of the maneuvers that are my strengths, but right now, I'm not so sure. Anyway, so I did pull out a little bit. I did go forward a little, adjusted my position, and then I wanted to go back in again. At this point, this man came out and he opened his boot up and he started taking out stuff. And at this point, she told me, complete the maneuver when and if you can. I said, all right. And so I stood there waiting because there were cars passing, and at one point in something behind me was going down, which I did see in the rear view mirror. There were two cars who were trying to figure out who would go first. Now I should have utilized this window, and I should have just parked up and called it a day. But since I was so stressed out about the mistake that I had made earlier, I didn't move. I just waited. And she looked at me with a very sweet smile. I don't think I can ever forget the smile. She was a darling though, don't get me wrong, but this was an overly sweet smile. We all know that smile. And it's not the most pleasant one. And she looked at me and said, "You could have completed the maneuver by now." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but I'm being overly cautious," which I now realize is probably not the best idea. And then at that point, I completed the maneuver, making a complete fool out of myself if I hadn't already. And she said, "All right, thank you. You can move on now." And then off we went. So that was my first serious. My driving test center was Chingford, by the way. Chingford is known to be a hard driving test center. They have quite a few roundabouts, quite a few big roundabouts, and quite a few small roundabouts as well. Since my test was very early in the morning at 8:20 a.m. on a Wednesday, my instructor had already preempted or predicted that the invigilator probably wouldn't take me round Charlie Brown's roundabout. That would have been a very busy roundabout. But the problem is that the other routes on Chingford take you through 20-mile-per-hour roads. And that's a problem. Because maintaining your speed at 20 miles per hour can be a very big problem, especially if you're like me and you get tense and you get nervous. My driving instructor told my husband after I'd failed about me. She said, "She talks fast, she acts fast, she does everything fast," which is actually ironic because when I'm calm, then I do everything very slowly, a little bit too slowly. When I was a child, I remember I used to constantly get scolded for being too slow. But somehow I've now adopted this strategy where when I'm tense or when I'm nervous, I do things quickly and I always mess them up. Because in my true nature, I have to do things calmly and I have to do things slowly. So when I try to hurry things up, everything always gets messed up. That's essentially what happened on my test. Since all of this had already gone down and I wasn't very happy with my performance, I also wanted to make sure that I don't go too slowly because my instructor has often told me that I tend to go too slowly on roads that have a higher speed limit. So anyway, we were on this road where I could see street lights, and I should have remembered that these roads on Chingford are mostly 20-mile-per-hour roads. I didn't see a sign on this road. I may have missed it in my anxiety, but I do think that there wasn't a sign. And at this point, there was no sat-nav either. Regardless, you're not supposed to trust the sat-nav because it can often give you misleading speed limits. My instructor had already told me that, and the invigilator had already pointed that out as well at the beginning of the test. But I didn't have any sat-nav here anyway, so I thought that it was a 30-mile road, which I then said. I told her, I said, "I think I'm going to assume that this is a 30-mile road because of the street lamps." And she said, "It's 20 miles actually." At this point, I was going at 24. So obviously I braked and I slowed down and I tried to maintain 20. But when I looked at the speedometer after a few minutes again, I was at 23, 24 again. And I do know that this happened more than once. This was my anxiety because normally I'm very good with maintaining my speed, and my instructor has also pointed this out, that even if I do go above by a mile or two, I constantly watch out. But since there was so much going on in my mind, that was also on me. So this translated into being a serious fault. If you make a speed error once or twice, it's fine. But if it happens multiple times, then it does get translated into a serious fault. So that was my second serious fault. And if this all wasn't enough, I made a third serious fault. And by this time, when this one happened, I just knew. Because up until now, I wasn't sure. And until now, honestly, I do feel like if I hadn't made the third mistake, then maybe she would have let it slide. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. I do feel like these mistakes are these mistakes are on the discretion of the invigilator to decide whether or not they want to consider them as serious faults or not. If somebody has more experience than me, then do let me know down in the comments if I had already failed by now for sure, or if there was still a little bit left for me to prove to her, which I did end up doing. And I'll tell you exactly now how. So this one was a classic, pure pure anxiety driven mistake. This one, I don't even know if I can forgive myself for this one, or any of them for that matter of fact. But obviously, how I feel about that, how I feel about all of it is something I'll talk about in the end of the video. Hang on for now. It gets better and better, trust me. So we were going like this, right? And now I hope I can draw it right. But there was a junction which was somewhat like this. So it's basically a Y junction. So this was a double road, right? You go like that and you come like that, basically, like that. She asked me to turn right. I said, all right. I gave the right indicator. Now in the UK, if you have to turn right, let's not turn this into a driving lesson, okay? Clearly I'm not qualified enough to give you a driving lesson. But if you have to turn right, then you are meant to park up here. I should have parked up here. Not park up. You're meant to stand and wait here, right? With your indicator on, and you're not meant to go onto this line, because that's where the oncoming traffic is coming from, right? So you're meant to go here, and I should have waited here. But I got confused and I thought that maybe this is where I have to go in from. So I stood here and I waited for a safe gap. Now when there's a safe gap, obviously cars are coming behind and in the front. You're meant to stay here, wait for the oncoming traffic to go, and then you're meant to take the safe gap. Now if you don't take the safe gap, then you get something called a hesitation fault, which is what I had thought would be my downfall. Because every time we would practice and every time we'd have a mock test, my instructor would tell me, Zar, you do hesitation fault, you do not take the safe gaps, you just keep on waiting there. And if you're waiting, then anybody behind you who also has to turn is also waiting. And I did have a car behind me that also wanted to turn in. So in my mind, I was a bit worked about the car waiting behind me, which is one of the things that my instructor had told me not to do. She always told me constantly to keep an eye for the people behind me, but not to be obsessed with the rear view mirror. Unfortunately, that's something I still have to work on, because this is one of those traumas that I've brought back from Pakistan. If somebody is waiting behind you for too long, they'll start honking at you and it can be a nightmare. But if there's nowhere to go, then there's nowhere to go. Then regardless of whatever the other person behind you is thinking, you have to wait your turn and you have to wait for a safe gap. And when you do find the safe gap, you're meant to take it, right? So either I'd be very tense or I'd pull out when it wouldn't be safe to do so. And now after we worked so hard on my driving, I hesitate a bit too much. So it's the best of both worlds in the worst way possible. So I do both, not taking, or I would do both. I don't want to label myself and say that that's what I want to do. That's what I constantly do, because I'm working very hard. Even after I failed my test, I'm working on improving those things. But anyway, so what I did was that I was going to turn in here. Now I could see that there's a bold line here and there's a broken line here. I know what that means, but I still wanted to take this turn. And if that's not bad enough, there was a yellow bollard here with a blue sign that said go in from here. But I saw that too late. In my defense, I saw that too late because it was, I think, on this side of the road. I was going to turn in here and she said, no, 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 what are you doing? And I think that she used the dual control here. I think she did. I'm quite sure that she did. But it all happened so fast. And yet in such slow motion that I can tell you exactly how I felt in the moment, but I don't think I can tell you any of the significant details, if that makes sense. But I do think that she braked for me. And I know for a fact that she held on to my steering. When the invigilator in your driving test has to do both these things, where they brake and they hold your steering, there's absolutely no doubt about the fact that you have failed. Anyway, she said, no, 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 you don't go in from here, you go in from there. So then I did that. I went in from there. When I went in from here, that's when I saw this bollard. And I took the turn and I whimpered. I still remember the sound I made, the noise I made. Because in this point I knew I was toast. I was roasted marshmallow. I was done for. And I said to her at this point, I said, I confused it with another turning. There was another turning on one of the routes here, and she said, just focus on your drive, please. And I said, yeah, okay. And that's what I did. I shut up and I focused on my drive, and I drove to the test center to find out, to no one's surprise, that I had successfully failed. The thing is that if you're in a different setup and there are new roads and you're nervous, I do think that these things are, it's possible to make these mistakes. I'm not happy about them at all. I'm very, very, very upset. I'm really, really heartbroken. And the thing is that it's not just a test that got wasted. It's not just the money that got wasted and the time that got wasted. The fact of the matter is also that my international driving license will expire in June, in the first week of June. And getting a driving test here in the UK is a nightmare. You have to pay double, triple the price of the test. Then obviously you have to pay your instructor as well, which is all understandable because you are using their car and they can't take a lesson with somebody else in the meantime. So it's obviously justified to have to pay them, but it is all money that's going away. It's time that's going away. My husband had to work from home the day I had my test because I didn't have the luxury to choose a time slot. He had to work from home because he had to get the kids ready for school and to drop them off to school, which is stuff that I normally do. And for what? For me to fail it? But even that's okay. That's all right. It's a learning experience. I'll know what not to do. I'll know what points to practice. I know that I have to practice so much now that it is muscle memory. I would only practice parallel parking when there wouldn't be any rush around. But yesterday I let 3-4 cars pass me by. I would stop in the middle of the maneuver. I would give the indicator to tell them what I'm doing, but I would wait for them to go. And since it wasn't rush hour or anything, people would stop so that they would let me complete the maneuver. But I would wait patiently to tell them that I'm willing to let you go and then I'll do this. These are things I didn't know. In theory, I knew I should have done, but I didn't do in the test, right? So now I'm practicing and I'm quite positive. I'm hopeful that the next time I take a test, I will, inshallah, hopefully pass. But I don't know when I'll be able to take the test, right? So that's where I stand right now. Now the action plan is that I'll take more mock tests with my instructor. Clearly, I don't need more lessons. I already know all of it, but I need a lot more practice. So we want to do a lot more practice, enough for me to not get anything wrong, regardless of how I'm feeling up here that day, because it's normal to be nervous. It's normal to be anxious, but it's not okay to make mistakes that you shouldn't make, right? And for that you need practice, and lots of practice. And then hopefully I'll get a test. Hopefully before my driving license expires, hopefully I'll pass so that I'll still be able to drive. Because in my case, it's not that life is impossible without being able to drive. You can get everywhere with public transport. But if, for example, I have to drive the kids to karate, driving them by car would take 12 to 15 minutes, but going by bus wouldn't mean not just half an hour, but also having to change 2 buses. So it's just an added hassle. While everything is doable, especially here in London, because the public transport system is good. Where I come from, in my religion and in my culture, we say that it just wasn't meant to happen. And if it wasn't meant to happen, then there is a solid reason why it wasn't meant to happen, even if I don't know the reason yet. And when it's meant to happen, it will happen. So the action plan is definitely to hopefully stay positive and to work towards getting it right the next time and to not make the same or other mistakes in the future. So anyway, I thought I'd share my journey with you. I'd share my experience with you. And if anybody's looking to take a test soon, best of luck to you. I do hope that you don't make the same mistakes I did, or you don't make any mistakes at all. I wish you the very best of luck. And may you pass soon, inshallah and ameen. And may I pass soon, inshallah and ameen as well. If anybody's starting off in life like I am and my family is, hang in there. It's not the easiest thing to do. But if we've come this far, then we'll get through it as well, inshallah. All my prayers for you guys, and do remember me in your prayers as well. These setbacks are difficult. They don't make you feel good about yourself at all, but it is what it is. Alhamdulillah for everything. And yeah, we'll keep powering on. I'll keep you guys posted. Do subscribe if you haven't already. I do make videos about my life here in London. I also make content about family travel and lots of other tidbits in betweens. I make content about my life basically. And if that's something that you think you might be interested in signing up for, then please do hit the subscribe button. Do share your driving experience with me. If you've passed, if you failed, please tell me. I'd love to hear your stories. I'd love to hear from you. and send me a prayer please, so that I pass the next time, inshallah, and Ameen to that. And take care of yourself guys. Bye. Allah Hafiz. Azan. Have to head to the mosque. Bye.